So it's incredible how rapidly software development has evolved. The pressure to push out updates and new features is just relentless.
It really is.
But let's be real. Breakneck speed without a strong security foundation, well, that's just a recipe for disaster. It's like
Yeah.
driving a high-performance car with faulty brakes.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's precisely why we're diving deep today into, well, the crucial world of securing your software development pipeline.
Right.
Our focus is squarely on CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment, and the vital role played by indicators of compromise, or IOCs.
And for you out there listening, committed to staying ahead of the curve but maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the info, think of this as your shortcut, your way to really grasp CI/CD security.
hmm
We've waded through a lot of material, really, to pull out the essential insights for you.
So what exactly is this CI/CD pipeline everyone keeps talking about? Simply put, it's an automated system. It takes code changes from a developer's machine and gets them out to users. Yeah, automatically building, testing, deploying the software. It makes the whole process much faster, much more reliable. It's really the engine of modern DevOps, you could say.
Our mission, then, for this deep dive, it's pretty clear. We're going to unpack how to effectively monitor and secure these pipelines, specifically by understanding and using indicators of compromise.
That's right. It's all about proactive defense, staying one step ahead of threats that could sneak into your software supply chain.
And these IOCs, what are they exactly?
Think of IOCs as digital clues,
Mhm.
little breadcrumbs that can signal if something malicious has happened or maybe is happening right now.
Like finding something that shouldn't be there?
Kind of, yeah. It's like finding a specific piece of evidence at a crime scene. It's a strong sign something's wrong. In cybersecurity, IOCs are these observable signs, these artifacts that point to a potential security incident inside your systems.
Okay, let's dig a little deeper then. We know CI/CD gives us incredible speed, which is fantastic, obviously. But what are the potential security risks? What should we be worried about?
Well, with that increased speed and automation comes a bigger attack surface, a wider area for things to potentially go wrong.
Ah.
Attackers, they definitely see these pipelines as potential entry points. If they manage to compromise even a small part of your CI/CD process,
Mhm.
the consequences can be really significant.
Like what, specifically?
They could inject malicious code directly into your software releases.
Hmm.
Imagine that going out to your users. Or they could steal sensitive information, API keys, customer data, or even just completely disrupt how your applications work.
Wow, okay. That paints a worrying picture. So, what's the essential defense? How do we protect our software supply chain against these kinds of threats?
Continuous monitoring. It's
Yeah.
absolutely vital. It's not really enough anymore to just collect logs and, hope for the best.
Right.
We need automated tools that are actively analyzing what's happening within the pipeline, detecting unusual activity, and, most importantly, pinpointing those indicators of compromise, those clues.
So, the goal is really to have these automated systems helping us spot malicious activity fast so we can react quickly and
And minimize the potential damage. Exactly. That's the key.
got it. Automated threat detection in CI/CD security is all about that early warning, enabling a rapid response before attackers can really achieve their goals.
Precisely. Stop them in their tracks, ideally.
Okay, so what specific things should we be looking for inside these CI/CD pipelines? What are some typical red flags, these IOCs?
Right. There are several key categories of IOCs to be vigilant about. Let's start with uh, unauthorized code changes.
Okay.
This includes things like code commits coming from people who shouldn't have access, or maybe changes happening at really unusual times, like 3 a.m.,
Hmm.
or from weird geographical locations.
Makes sense.
You should also be wary of code that just looks suspicious. Maybe it's overly complex, or there are large unexplained deletions, or code that violates your team's established coding standards. Anything out of the ordinary.
Right, like a digital signature that just doesn't belong.
Okay, what else should we be watching for?
Next up, we have suspicious deployment patterns.
Deployment patterns. Yeah. For example, seeing deployments going directly from, say, a developer's feature branch straight into the production environment. That's generally a huge red flag.
Definitely.
Also, pay attention to deployments happening at unusual times, outside your normal release windows, or maybe deployments being kicked off by user accounts or automated systems that don't normally touch production releases.
Okay, so any deviation from the established how we deploy things process is a potential indicator. What about the building blocks of our software, the dependencies?
Good point. That leads us straight to compromised dependencies. Your CI/CD pipeline, really should be continuously scanning for known vulnerabilities, those CVEs, common vulnerabilities, and exposures in all the third-party libraries and packages you rely on.
So scanning the things we pull in from outside.
Exactly. And also, watch out for the sudden introduction of new, unexpected dependencies showing up in your project's configuration files.
Yeah.
Or any attempts to download dependencies from sources that aren't on your trusted list.
Right, so it's not just our code, but all the external code we build upon that needs that careful scrutiny. What about the pipeline itself? The sequence of automated steps.
Absolute critical. Look for unusual pipeline execution. If steps that normally work fine suddenly start failing consistently, that's suspicious. Or if the entire pipeline run suddenly starts taking significantly longer to complete without any obvious reason, like a much larger build, that's also a warning sign.
Okay.
Similarly, any unauthorized changes to the order in which pipeline steps run or how they run could indicate someone's tampered with the process.
These all sound like things that potentially we could automate the monitoring for. You mentioned one more category earlier, didn't you?
Yes, and it's a really critical one. Secrets exposure attempts.
Ah, secrets.
Yeah.
Like API keys, passwords.
Precisely. Keep a close eye on your logs for anything showing attempts to access those sensitive secrets. API keys, database credentials, tokens from places within the pipeline where they shouldn't be accessed. And, although ideally you'd catch this earlier, also be vigilant for any private secrets that might accidentally get hard-coded directly into code changes. It still happens.
Wow, okay. So by consistently monitoring for these types of IOCs across all these categories, we can build up a much stronger, more proactive defense.
Exactly. That ongoing monitoring for these specific indicators of compromise is what really strengthens proactive security in your CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah.
It shifts security from being just reactive, cleaning up after something bad happens, to being an active, continuous defense.
And what are the real, tangible benefits of catching these IOCs early on? Why is it so crucial?
Oh, the advantages are substantial. First, obviously, rapid incident response.
Okay.
If you detect an IOC early, your security team can jump on it immediately,
Yeah.
potentially stopping an attack before the attacker actually achieves what they set out to do, whether that's stealing data or breaking your systems.
So closing that window of opportunity.
Exactly. Early detection dramatically shrinks that window for attackers. It can even prevent breaches entirely, which is, a huge win in terms of risk mitigation.
Makes sense. What else?
Second is limiting damage. By catching threats early in their life cycle, you reduce the amount of time an attacker has inside your pipeline, their dwell time. This directly limits the potential blast radius of a security breach.
Containing it quickly.
Right. Containing a breach early saves significant resources, prevents wider impact, and helps protect your reputation. And finally, there's improving threat knowledge.
How so?
Well, analyzing the IOCs you actually find gives you valuable insights into how attackers are targeting your specific CI/CD environment. What methods are they using? What are they after?
Ah, learning from the attempts.
Precisely. This knowledge can then be fed back into enhancing your future security measures, refining your detection rules, and maybe even guiding your threat hunting activities.
Okay, so early detection is absolutely paramount. Now, the big question. How do we actually automate the process of finding these anomalies, these IOCs, within our pipelines? It sounds like a lot to track manually.
It is, and automation is key. There are several powerful automated methods we can leverage. Let's start with the foundation. Comprehensive logging and auditing.
Logging, the bedrock.
It truly forms the bedrock, yeah. You need detailed logs from every single aspect of your CI/CD process. This provides the raw data, the evidence that's necessary for any meaningful analysis.
What specific kinds of logs are most important here?
Primarily, you need pipeline execution logs. Modern monitoring tools can use automated baselining on these.
Baselining, what's that?
It's basically the system learning what normal looks like for your pipeline runs. It analyzes logs from successful, typical runs, how long steps usually take, how often they succeed or fail.
Ah, okay. Establishes a baseline.
Exactly. And then it automatically flags anything that deviates significantly from that established pattern, like a build step suddenly taking 3 times longer than usual, or an error popping up where it never did before.
That sounds really smart. A way to spot subtle changes. What other logs are critical?
Code commit logs are essential. You need to track changes to your code base. Monitor these for unusual activity commits from people who shouldn't be committing, commits happening way outside normal working hours, or changes containing suspicious content, like maybe large deletions or heavily obfuscated code.
Right. Tracking who changed what, when.
Then you have access logs. These record players who is accessing your CI/CD systems, the build servers, the repositories, the deployment tools,
Logins, essentially.
logins, yeah, and more. Monitoring for unusual logins, maybe from new geographic locations you don't operate in, or a sudden burst of failed login attempts followed by a success, or someone trying to change critical pipeline settings. These can be strong indicators of a compromised account.
Okay, and finally,
Finally, deployment logs. These can reveal anomalies in the timing and destination of your software deployments. Again, tools can learn your typical deployment patterns and alert you if something happens outside those established norms, like a deployment to a production server that wasn't scheduled.
okay, so we're collecting all this rich log data from execution, commits, access, deployments, but how do we actually make sense of this potentially massive volume of data and pinpoint the IOCs we're looking for?
That's a great question. And that's where security information and event management, or SIEM integration, becomes really crucial.
SAM tools.
You feed all these CI/CD logs into your SIEM tool. SIEMs are specifically designed to aggregate, correlate, and analyze security data from many different sources across your entire infrastructure, not just CI/CD.
So what can a SIEM actually do with all this CI/CD log data once it gets it?
Well, first, they often use machine learning and advanced analytics to automatically spot unusual patterns within your CI/CD logs that might signal a security incident. Things a human might miss just looking at raw logs.
Finding needles in haystacks.
Kind of, yeah. But beyond that, you can configure very specific rules within the SIEM to actively look for known CI/CD IOCs.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. For instance, you can create a rule to alert you if the SIEM detects a file hash in your build outputs, maybe in a compiled artifact that's known to be malicious. Perhaps it matches a hash seen in previous attacks.
Okay.
Or, another powerful one, if your CI/CD servers suddenly start communicating with IP addresses or domains that are known malicious command and control servers, C2 servers. This information often comes from threat intelligence feeds, which we should definitely talk more about.
Right, leveraging external threat data.
Exactly. And another critical rule would be to alert on any unauthorized attempts to access those private secrets we talked about, outside of the approved pipeline steps or locations.
So the SIEM acts like a central hub, constantly analyzing all this data, looking for known bad stuff, and also just suspicious deviations.
You got it. Think of it as an automated security analyst, constantly watching your CI/CD pipeline, spotting things that might indicate compromise.
Okay, so the SIEM detects something potentially bad. What happens next? How do we know?
That crucial next step is real-time alerting and notifications. It's vital.
Makes sense. You need to know immediately.
Absolutely. When an anomaly or a known IOC is detected by the SIEM or another monitoring tool, automated alerts ensure that the right security teams are notified immediately, so they can jump into action quickly.
What kind of events would typically trigger these alerts?
It could be things like repeated unusual build failures that don't have a clear explanation, or suspicious code changes flagged by static analysis tools integrated into the pipeline. Or, like we said, attempts to access secrets from weird places, or unusual network traffic coming from your CI/CD servers, especially if it's going to unknown or suspicious destinations online.
So immediate notification is key for that rapid response. You also mentioned performance monitoring earlier. How does that fit in?
Yeah, so performance monitoring is mainly about making sure your CI/CD pipeline runs smoothly and efficiently. But it can indirectly help uncover IOCs. Well, sudden slowdowns in pipeline execution, or maybe your CI/CD servers suddenly running out of CPU or memory. These resource exhaustion issues can sometimes be indicators of attack, or IOAs.
IOAs, not IOCs.
Right. They aren't direct proof of compromise themselves, but these performance problems often warrant a deeper investigation. And during that investigation, you might then uncover the underlying security compromise, the IOCs. So performance issues can be the smoke that leads you to the fire.
Interesting. And finally, you mentioned proactively scanning for weaknesses.
Absolutely. Continuous vulnerability scanning. This is a proactive measure. You regularly scan your actual CI/CD infrastructure itself, the build tools, the source control system, any plugins you're using, the containers involved looking for known vulnerabilities, those CVEs.
Why is that an IOC?
Well, the vulnerabilities themselves are potential IOCs because they represent weaknesses that attackers could exploit to compromise your pipeline. Finding these CVEs means you've found a potential entry point that needs patching immediately before it gets exploited.
Got it. So it's about closing doors before attackers can even try to open them. It really sounds like a comprehensive, multi-layered approach then. You've got the logging, the SIEM analysis, the real-time alerts, performance checks, and vulnerability scanning all working together.
Exactly. It's not just one thing. By implementing these different automated methods in concert, you significantly boost your ability to detect anomalies and identify those critical indicators of compromise within your CI/CD pipelines. And that leads to a much, much more secure software supply chain.
You touched on threat intelligence earlier, saying we should discuss it more. Can you elaborate on how that integrates into this whole picture of securing CI/CD?
Yeah, definitely. Threat intelligence is essentially curated information about existing and emerging cyber threats. It covers the attackers, their motivations, their
It's
methods,
knowing your enemy.
pretty much. Knowing their tactics, techniques, and procedures, their TTPs, which is basically how they operate. This intel comes from various places: industry reports detailing recent attacks, government advisories warning about specific threat groups or vulnerabilities, and, importantly, threat data feeds.
Data feeds.
Yeah, these are continuous streams of indicators like known malicious IP addresses, dodgy domains, malicious file hashes, things like that. Think of it like having a constantly updated library about the bad guys and their latest tricks. It helps you understand the threats most relevant to your organization.
That sounds incredibly valuable, having that context. But how do we manage all that information potentially coming from dozens of different sources? It sounds like it could be overwhelming.
It can be, and that's where threat intelligence platforms, or TIPs, come in.
The peas.
Yeah. Organizations use these platforms to collect, centralize, aggregate, and analyze threat intelligence from all those diverse sources: vendors, open source feeds, government agencies, industry groups.
What do they do with it?
A TIP helps you filter out the noise, prioritize the threats that are actually most relevant to your specific industry, your technology stack, your risk profile. It helps make the intelligence actionable and enhances your overall security posture.
So we're not just blindly reacting to every single indicator in these threat feeds. That sounds important.
Absolutely crucial.
Effort.
It's vital to remember that threat intelligence data feeds are most effective when used to add context to your own security detections. They shouldn't usually be the sole trigger for your security alerts.
Why not?
Because context matters. An IP address might be listed as malicious, but was associated with a type of attack relevant to you. How old is the intelligence? You need to evaluate the relevance and reliability of the information before applying it directly to block traffic or trigger high-priority alerts in your environment. It informs your decisions. It doesn't dictate them blindly.
Okay, that makes sense. Context is key. You also mentioned crowdsourcing earlier. How does the collective knowledge of the wider security community play into this?
Crowdsourcing is incredibly powerful in cybersecurity. Historically, incident response was often done in silos. One company gets hit, they deal with it, maybe share limited info.
Right.
But now, through things like threat intelligence platforms and other sharing initiatives, organizations can tap into this vast pool of shared knowledge. Security vendors, government agencies, cloud providers, researchers, individual analysts, they all contribute indicators and insights.
So, sharing findings.
Exactly. This shared knowledge constantly refines detection technologies, helps identify new TTPs faster, and generally makes everyone more secure. It's a collective defense.
It sounds like a global neighborhood watch for cyber threats. Are there specific examples of this kind of information sharing in action?
Oh, yes. Information sharing and analysis centers, or ISACs, are a great example. These are often industry-specific groups, like for finance or healthcare or energy, where companies within that sector collaborate to share threat intelligence that's particularly relevant to them.
Tailored intelligence.
Right. And then there's open source intelligence, OSINT. This involves collecting and analyzing publicly available information from blogs, forums, news reports, social media, to gather insights on threat actors, vulnerabilities, attack campaigns, and more. Lots of valuable stuff out there if you know where to look.
And how does all this shared intelligence actually make our detection tools like SIEMs or antivirus better?
Well, think about it. Attackers often reuse their tools, their infrastructure, their methods across multiple targets. It's efficient for them.
Makes sense.
So if one organization detects a new piece of malware or a specific C2 server IP address, they can share those details, the file hash, the IP, the malicious domain. This information gets fed into threat intelligence platforms and databases.
And then?
And then security vendors can use that fresh intelligence to update their detection rules, their signatures, their block lists. So your antivirus, your firewall, your SIEM gets updated, often automatically, to recognize and block that same threat if it shows up targeting your organization. It's a collaborative defense mechanism, leveraging shared experience against common enemies.
That makes perfect sense. A real force multiplier. Now, you mentioned a specific tool for digging into these indicators when we find them. VirusTotal. What exactly is that, and how can it help us in this CI/CD security context?
Right, VirusTotal. It's an incredibly useful and free online service run by Google. It lets anyone upload a suspicious file or submit a domain, a URL, or an IP address for analysis.
And what does it do?
It aggregates the results from over 70 different antivirus engines, website scanners, and other security tools. It gives you a really comprehensive view of whether that thing you submitted that IOC is considered malicious, suspicious, or clean by a wide range of security vendors from around the globe.
So if we find, say, a weird file hash in our CI/CD build logs, we can just copy and paste it into VirusTotal.
Exactly that. You submit an artifact, like a file hash or an IP address, and VirusTotal gives you back a detailed report. The first thing you'll likely look at is the detection tab.
What's that show?
It shows you exactly how many and which specific security vendors have flagged that IOC as malicious, suspicious, or clean. For instance, we looked at an example file hash earlier. VirusTotal showed it was flagged as malicious by over 50 different vendors.
Wow, 50 vendors. That's pretty
Is
conclusive.
a very strong indicator, yes.
Mm.
And often it will identify the specific malware family, like in that case it was identified as Flag Pro malware, which is known to be used by an advanced threat group called Black Tech. So you get context too.
That's incredibly useful information. What other parts of the VirusTotal report are valuable?
The Details tab gives you static analysis info. Things like various cryptographic hashes, MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256.
Mm.
For our example, the MD5 hash was 287D, 612E, 229B71, C90AF54947, 313827, year 8205. It also shows file type, size, timestamps, and importantly, when VirusTotal first and last saw this particular artifact submitted.
History is good. What else?
The Relations tab is often fascinating. It shows you other IOCs that VirusTotal has seen connected to the one you submitted.
Redacted.
Like, if you submit a file hash, it might show you URLs or domains the file contacted when it was analyzed, like org.missecure.com in our example, or IP addresses it communicated with, like 207.148.109.242, or even other files that might have dropped onto the system. It helps you map out the potential scope of an incident.
Ah, so it helps you see the bigger picture, connect the dots between different suspicious elements.
Precisely. Then there's the Behavior tab, which is also incredibly insightful.
What does that show?
This shows you what the IOC did when VirusTotal executed it in a controlled sandbox environment, like a safe virtual machine. It reveals the malware's behavior, its tactics, techniques, and procedures, those TTPs.
Like what specifically?
You might see network communications it initiated, like the HTTP request to that org.missecure.com domain we saw. You might see registry keys it modified, files it created or deleted, processes it launched. It might even identify specific tools or techniques it used, like input capture, which suggests keylogging capabilities.
Wow.
And it often maps these observed behaviors to frameworks like MITRE ATTCK, identifying TTPs like command and control, which was observed in our example malware.
That provides some really deep insight into how the malware actually operates. That's powerful. Are there any other key sections in a VirusTotal report?
Yeah, there's usually a community tab. This is where security professionals from around the world can leave comments, share their own findings or context about the IOC. It adds another layer of human intelligence.
Like peer review?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, right at the top of the report, you'll see the overall vendors ratio, that number of vendors flagging it, and often a community score, reflecting feedback from VirusTotal users. These give you a quick glance at the overall consensus on whether the artifact is likely malicious.
It really sounds like an indispensable tool for any security analyst investigating potential threats, whether in CI/CD or anywhere else. Is there anything important to keep in mind when using VirusTotal? A catch.
Yes, one very important thing. Any data you upload to VirusTotal, like files, is shared publicly with the security community and subscribers.
Ah, okay, public sharing.
Right. So it's crucial not to submit any files containing personal information, confidential company data, or anything highly sensitive that you wouldn't want potentially becoming public knowledge. Be mindful of what you upload.
That's a really important caveat. Okay, you've given us a fantastic overview of identifying indicators, leveraging threat intel, and investigating them with tools like VirusTotal. But we often have limited time and resources. How do we prioritize? Which IOCs should we focus on most?
That is a critical question. And that's where the pyramid of pain, a concept developed by security researcher David J. Bianco, becomes incredibly useful.
The pyramid of pain sounds intriguing. What is it?
It's a framework that helps us understand that not all indicators of compromise are created equal. Some are much easier for attackers to change than others.
Okay.
The pyramid visually represents this. It arranges different types of IOCs in layers, from the easiest to change at the bottom to the hardest at the top. The higher up the pyramid you can detect and block indicators, the more pain you inflict on the attacker, making their job much harder.
Ah, okay. So it guides where we should focus our efforts for maximum impact. Can you walk us through the levels, starting from the bottom?
Sure. At the very bottom, the widest level, representing the easiest indicators for attackers to change, are hash values.
Like the MD5 hash we talked about from VirusTotal.
Exactly. These are unique fingerprints for specific malicious files. While they're great for identifying that exact file, changing the hash is trivial for an attacker. They just need to modify the file slightly, add a byte, change a comment, and the hash completely changes.
So blocking one hash doesn't stop variance.
Correct. They can generate endless variations easily. So blocking hashes causes minimal pain.
Okay, easy for them to bypass. What's the next level up?
Next up are IP addresses, the numerical addresses of servers online, like that malicious IP 207.148.109.242 we saw associated with the FlyPro malware.
Right.
Blocking an IP address is still considered easy for attackers to get around. They can quickly switch to a different server, use compromised machines, or leverage services like VPNs or Tor. It requires a little more effort than changing a hash, but not much.
Still pretty simple for them. What comes after IPs?
Then we get to domain names, like org.mesecure.com. Changing a domain name requires a bit more effort and planning than just swapping an IP. They have to register a new domain, set up DNS, maybe wait for propagation.
So it's a bit more involved.
Right. Blocking malicious domains inflicts simple pain. It forces them to acquire and set up new infrastructure, which takes some time and potentially leaves more traces for investigators.
Okay, moving up. We're making it slightly more difficult for them. What's the next level?
At the next level, we find network host artifacts. This is evidence left behind on networks or on compromised computers other than just IPs or domains.
Like what?
Think specific patterns in network traffic, like a unique user agent string used by their malware when it communicates. We saw those HTTP requests and the VirusTotal behavior. Maybe the pattern of those requests is unique. Or it could be specific file names the malware always uses, or registry keys it creates on a Windows machine.
Things they have to configure in their tools.
Exactly. Detecting and blocking these artifacts is considered annoying for attackers. It forces them to go back and reconfigure their tools, maybe even recompile their malware to change these identifiers. It starts to slow them down.
Okay, annoying is good. What's in the challenging zone? The yellow part of the pyramid?
That would be tools. Here we're talking about the actual software the attackers use to conduct their operations. Things like specific password cracking utilities, exploit kits, remote access Trojans, RATs, or custom malware frameworks.
Like the input capture tool or capability we saw?
Potentially, yes, if it's a distinct tool.
Mm.
If you can reliably detect and block the specific tools they rely on, it becomes genuinely challenging for them. They're forced to find or develop entirely new tools, which require significant time, skill, and resources. They might have to abandon tools they're comfortable and effective with.
That sounds like a substantial hurdle. We're getting close to the top now. What's at the very peak? What causes the most pain?
At the very top, the most difficult level for attackers to change are their tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs.
TTPs again. Like the command and control tactic we saw.
Exactly. TTPs describe the attacker's behavior, their fundamental approach, their operational playbook. How do they gain initial access? How do they move laterally? How do they exfiltrate data? How do they maintain persistence?
Their methods, essentially.
Yes, their overall methodology. If you can effectively detect and respond based on their behavior, their TTPs, rather than just the specific artifacts or tools they happen to be using today, you inflict the most pain. It's tough for them to counter.
Why is it so tough?
Because changing TTPs means changing how they operate. It often requires learning entirely new skills, adopting different strategies, maybe even retraining their operators. It fundamentally disrupts their campaigns. If you can consistently detect and block their preferred TTPs, you might force them to give up on you as a target or significantly degrade their effectiveness.
Wow. So the ultimate goal for us as defenders is really to shift our detection and response efforts higher up this pyramid of pain. Focus on the things that are hardest and most costly for attackers to change.
Precisely. While blocking hashes and IPs has its place for immediate tactical defense, focusing your more strategic efforts on detecting network and host artifacts, the tools they use, and especially their underlying TTPs, that provides a much more durable, effective, and painful defense in the long run.
That's a really powerful framework. Now, we've talked a lot about identifying and investigating indicators, using threat intel, prioritizing with the pyramid of pain, but all of that fundamentally relies on having good quality data to analyze in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us back to the critical importance of logging within our CI/CD pipelines.
Couldn't agree more. Logs are the absolute cornerstone of any effective security monitoring strategy, and really operational monitoring too. They provide that detailed chronological record of specific events, metrics, errors, everything happening within your pipeline.
They're the raw material for investigation.
Exactly. They offer invaluable insights for forensic analysis when things inevitably go wrong, whether it's a security incident or just a failed build.
But let's be honest, in today's complex, interconnected microservice world, we can easily drown in logs, right? Just this massive flood of text data. How do we make it manageable and actually useful for security?
That's a huge challenge, and log optimization is essential. One of the most critical steps is adopting structured logging.
Structured log, like using JSON.
Typically, yes, JSON is very common and effective. Instead of just logging plain text strings, you log events as structured data with key value pairs. This adds inherent organization and context right into the log data itself.
And what's the benefit of that?
Oh, it makes a world of difference. Structured logs are significantly easier for machines and humans to parse, visualize, filter, group, tag, and query effectively. Imagine trying to find all error logs related to a specific user ID in terabytes of plain text versus running a simple query on a structured field. It saves developers and security analysts a massive amount of time during troubleshooting or investigations.
Structured logs sound far more efficient, definitely. What other key steps can we take to optimize our logging practices?
Another fundamental best practice is standardizing log severity levels across your entire organization.
Like debug, info, warning, error.
Exactly. Defining clear, consistent meanings for levels like debug, info, warning, error, critical, or fatal creates a common language. Everyone understands the significance of a log event based on its level and knows roughly what kind of action might be needed. It's a baseline for triaging issues.
Ensures everyone's on the same page regarding urgency. Makes sense. What are some specific logging best practices that are particularly relevant for CI/CD pipelines, given their interconnected nature?
Good question. First, definitely log communication between components. In modern systems, a single action, like a code deployment, might trigger events across multiple services: source control, build server, artifact repository, deployment agent. You need to log the interactions at each boundary to trace the full life cycle of that event.
Track the whole flow.
All right. Second, log communications with external APIs. If your pipeline talks to third-party services, maybe a security scanner, a notification service like Slack or email, a cloud provider API, log those requests, and importantly, the responses you get back. This gives you visibility into critical external dependencies.
Okay, what else?
Third, add valuable metadata to your logs. Don't just log the message, include context. Where did the event happen? Which service, which function? Was the service name, the software version running, the environment, dev, staging, prod? This makes logs useful not just for devs, but for ops, security, even business intelligence or support teams.
Makes the logs richer.
Much richer. Fourth, ensure log accessibility. Centralize your log data. Different teams need access: developers troubleshooting a build, security investigating an alert, ops checking performance. Having logs scattered everywhere is inefficient. A central log management system is key.
Centralization for collaboration. Got it.
And finally, try to combine textual and metric fields within your logs where it makes sense. Include both the human-readable description, deployment failed, connection timeout, and maybe relevant machine-readable metrics, for example, connection attempts, 3, timeouts 5,000. This can give you a better at-a-glance understanding before diving deep into separate metric systems.
So it's really about making our logs more structured, standardized, informative, context-rich, easily accessible, and ultimately just more actionable for everyone involved, security and operations alike.
Exactly. Well-optimized logs are not just a chore. They are a critical asset for gaining deep visibility into your CI/CD pipeline and, crucially, for securing it effectively.
And these well-optimized logs, they provide benefits beyond just looking back after something breaks, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned they can be used for proactive alerting too, helping us spot trouble before it becomes a major incident.
Absolutely. Logs are fantastic leading indicators of potential issues. By setting up effective alerts based on the rich data within your logs, you can often identify and address problems proactively, sometimes before they even have a noticeable impact on users or downstream systems.
How do log-based alerts compare to alerts based purely on metrics, like CPU usage or error rates?
Well, metrics are great for telling you the outcome CPU is high, error rate spiked. Logs often provide the crucial context, the why behind that outcome. They detail the specific events, errors, or sequences of actions that led to the metric changing.
Ah, the story behind the number.
Exactly. So to get the most intelligence out of your alerts, you really need to make them specific and contextual, drawing on that detailed information you've carefully put into your structured logs.
Okay, so what are some different types of logging alerts we can configure to enhance this proactive monitoring, beyond just alert if error log appears?
Oh, there are several useful patterns. You have the basic immediate alert, of course, triggered by critical or fatal log messages that demand instant attention. Someone needs to look now,
Right, the fire alarm.
pretty much. Then you have more than alerts. These trigger if a specific type of event happens more frequently than a predefined threshold within a certain time window. For example, alert if we see more than 10 failed login attempts to the build server in 5 minutes. That could indicate a brute force attempt.
Looking for unusual frequency.
Exactly. Conversely, you have less than alerts. These are often more proactive. They trigger when something you expect to happen regularly doesn't happen. For instance, alert if we haven't seen a successful production deployment complete log message in the last 24 hours, assuming you deploy daily. Maybe something is stuck.
That's clever. Alerting on the absence of good news.
It can be very effective. And then you get into more advanced types like dynamic alerts where the threshold adjusts automatically based on historical patterns like time of day or day of week. Or ratio alerts that trigger based on the relationship between different events, like if the ratio of error logs to success logs for a specific process exceeds a certain percentage.
So it's not just about single error messages. We can alert on patterns, frequency and activity, ratios, lots of sophisticated ways to spot trouble brewing.
Definitely. But just setting up the alert conditions isn't enough. The structure and routing of those alerts are just as crucial.
How so?
You need to ensure alerts contain enough context for the recipient to understand the problem quickly. And critically, you need to route alerts to the specific teams or individuals who are actually responsible for investigating and taking action on that particular type of issue.
Avoid spamming everyone.
Exactly. Targeted routing is key to minimizing alert fatigue, that feeling of being constantly bombarded by irrelevant notifications, which leads to people ignoring potentially important alerts.
We've all been there. So ultimately, how do we decide when an alert is important enough to actually push to someone, maybe wake them up in the middle of the night, versus just putting it on a dashboard?
That really is the art and science of effective alerting. It's a critical decision. You have to carefully consider the genuine urgency of the alert. What's the potential impact if no one acts immediately?
Right.
And crucially, what is the likely reaction and ability of the person receiving the alert to take meaningful action at that moment? Ask yourself, if I received this alert paging me at 2 a.m., is there actually something concrete I could and should do right then that justifies waking me up?
Good question to ask.
If the answer is no, maybe the immediate action is just wait until morning, then perhaps it's better surfaced on a dashboard or sent as a lower priority notification for review during working hours. The goal is to make your critical alerts truly actionable and valuable, not just contribute to noise and burnout.
That's a fantastic point. Making alerts meaningful, not just noisy. This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive, really covering the critical ground for securing CI/CD pipelines. Let's quickly recap some of the main takeaways for our listeners.
Absolutely. I think the key things we've highlighted are, first, as software development speeds up, robust security within CI/CD isn't optional, it's paramount. Second, indicators of compromise, those IOCs, are critical clues that let us detect threats early. Third, automation isn't just nice to have. It's essential for monitoring pipelines effectively, finding IOCs at scale, and enabling rapid response.
Right, automation is key.
Fourth, threat intelligence provides vital context to understand and prioritize the threats we detect. Fifth, tools like VirusTotal are invaluable for digging deep into suspicious artifacts. Sixth, understanding the pyramid of pain helps us focus our defensive efforts where they hurt attackers the most on TTPs, tools, and artifacts.
And finally,
None of this works without a solid foundation of good logging practices, structured, contextual, accessible logs, coupled with a smart, well-thought-out alerting strategy that minimizes noise and maximizes actionability.
so for you listening, hopefully, you now have a much clearer, more comprehensive understanding of these crucial elements. You're better equipped to think about securing your own software development pipeline and proactively identifying those potential threats before they cause real damage.
And this really leads to a critical question for you to ponder in your own context. How can your organization most effectively weave these automated monitoring techniques, this valuable threat intelligence, and these sound logging and alerting practices into your existing CI/CD workflows? How do you build a truly resilient and secure software supply chain?
Yeah, and critically, how do you strike that right balance? The balance between the need for development speed and the non-negotiable requirement for robust security within your specific environment, it's a constant calibration.
It really is.
For those of you eager to explore even further, we definitely encourage you to check out the resources that informed our discussion today. There's some great stuff on the earlscan.io blog, really informative articles from Splunk and CoreLogics on logging and alerting, and the Threat Hunting Project has some practical techniques too.
Yeah, lots of good material out there. Because the landscape of CI/CD security, well, it's constantly evolving. New threats emerge, new tools become available. So continuous vigilance, continuous learning, it's absolutely essential to stay ahead.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today.